All right, welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have Joe Spisak. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, James. Excited to be
No,
here.
yeah, thanks for coming on. So we're going to take a slightly different approach to this podcast. So usually we're covering a lot of strength conditioning or physical preparation style topics, but today we're going to cover more technical training topics. So do you want to maybe give a brief background about yourself, Joe? I know you're a very accomplished wrestler there, and I've felt that personally too. So it'd be good to dive into that.
Yeah, sure thing, man. I'm a Pennsylvania guy. I've been wrestling since I've been 4 years old. My dad was a Division I wrestler. My grandpa wrestled in college and is in the New Jersey Hall of Fame for wrestling. So it's definitely been
Damn.
a family thing for me. So I told you I grew up in Pennsylvania, which is a very strong wrestling state. Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, like they're all kind of like top tier states in that regard. And then I ended up winning states my senior year in Pennsylvania. I was a 4-time state place winner, 2-time finalist. And then I ended up going to the University of Virginia, where I wrestled at 133 and then 141 pounds. I was a 4-time national qualifier. And ended up wrestling there for 5 years. I did an injury red shirt my sophomore year whenever I broke my shoulder. I was ranked as high as number 2 or number 3 nationally, was pretty much like a perennial top 10 guy. I moved down to Austin to continue growing one of my businesses. And I kind of just started picking up jujitsu down here within like the last year-ish or so, and have been having an absolute blast training with some beasts down here.
Yeah, man. Austin's the mecca now, isn't it? Jiu-jitsu is Austin, and Austin and jiu-jitsu together is like synonymous.
I had no idea. So I thought we were just in this cool tech hub where I could grow my companies. And then I start scrapping with some professional fighters and top 10 jiu-jitsu guys in the world. We have a couple other D1 wrestlers that are in our group. So yeah, man, there's some tough dudes down here. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So I think this will be perfect as we lead into today's topic and covering wrestling concepts for jiu-jitsu. So obviously, wrestling itself as a sport has value, and obviously as jiu-jitsu is starting to change to more wrestling-based rule sets with things like ADCC, the wrestling is becoming more and more important. But obviously, applying just pure wrestling is not advantageous in some instances with jiu-jitsu. So I think what would be a good place to start is the big mistakes you see jiu-jitsu players making in their stand-up game with wrestling, because I think there's a lot of, I think that you've mentioned as well, and Andrew's mentioned at class and things like that around mistakes that jiu-jitsu players make, or I guess you say instinctively do, that gets them into trouble during that stand-up.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things that I've noticed, whenever you're wrestling at a really high level and you kind of take that jump from high school wrestling where you are a big fish in a small pond to coming into college wrestling where it's like you feel like you're learning all over again. Like I didn't get my first takedown in a college room for like a couple months, and it was just super demoralizing. but a big skill gap difference is in the hand fighting. And that's one of the things I noticed coming into jiu-jitsu and starting to train jiu-jitsu much harder is there's just less of a focus on hand fighting. And I noticed some of the jiu-jitsu people, even like seasoned black belts and stuff like that, they'll get kind of lackadaisical on their shot setups and kind of fall into legs, which, with guys who are good at hand fighting and can control the ties on their feet, that's like smelling blood in the water for us. Like if we have someone taking a sloppy shot, I love getting people into that front headlock position and then, bullying the shit out of them and looking to score some points from there. So I think that's one of the big things with stand up. And then another thing, so Brandon Gambucci, a guy who's, big in the Austin jiu-jitsu scene down here, and he was a Division I wrestler at Duke. He's super dangerous on his feet from like a upper body perspective. Throws like lat drops, headlocks, things of that nature. I maybe it's just the people that I've been training with in jiu-jitsu, but It seems like there's some upper body stuff there that still needs to get worked on, because I'm watching Brandon like launch dudes across the room. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Do you want to maybe dive into a little bit about hand fighting? What hand fighting actually is, and I guess what you're trying to achieve doing it? Because I think when jiu-jitsu players that hear hand fighting might not understand what's really happening there and what you're trying to achieve doing it, because it's definitely a skill that takes time.
Yeah, great question. So hand fighting, I guess, general principle is you're looking to better your position on your feet and open up angles to score points, right? So whenever you're on your feet, you're in your stance. Like general rule of thumb is you don't want to have outside tie, right? So if someone has inside tie on you, you're starting to pummel in so you can get inside tie. And what my dad would always say is you're looking to create angles, you're looking to open up windows, right? So while we're hand fighting, you may be doing wrist rolls, you may be faking shots, you may be head beating. You're looking to ultimately get that person in bad position so you can get in on legs and get a really easy shot. And whatever I was alluding to earlier was, sometimes I see jiu-jitsu guys just kind of shoot in and get in on a leg, and then they really have to go like Hulk smash to score points and get a finish, right? But you don't want to have to go Hulk smash and exert all that energy. If you can hand fight super hard, hit a nice fake, hit a snap, elbow pass, and get them to the point where their body's facing the other direction and you can just blast double them to the ground, and exert that energy up front, that's what you're trying to do with hand fighting. You're trying to put your opponent into bad position so you can score points on them much easier. And generally, also, I guess to add to that, like you hear coaches say, like exert your will, like kind of like force your positioning on them, right? Like if I'm really good at like a wrist roll, fake, snap, shot, whatever, I'm trying to force those positions on my opponent, right? Like that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to bully them into your positions while you're hand fighting. Yeah.
Nice.
That's
are there things that someone who is trying to up their wrestling game, I guess techniques or things they can focus on that are high percentage to really drill? Because obviously there's so many different things you can do. There's so many different setups. Everything almost needs a setup. I think that's one of the other things. I know that's something I did, and a lot of other people do, is just try to come in and just take a shot, because that's kind of all that we know, and all that we learn through jiu-jitsu is here's how to do a single leg, here's how to do a double leg, okay, and then try and do it when you're actually training. But are there things that someone can drill to start practicing these setups and different things?
Yeah, great question as well. So I guess my first point to that would be always try and train with the best possible people you can. Like, again, another Steve Spisak, my dad-ism is like, you never want to be the guy in the room who's beating up on everybody for a prolonged period of time. Like, you want to be going in and getting your ass kicked. Like, that's how you ultimately get better. It's like the iron sharpens iron adage. So any opportunity you have to train with someone more knowledgeable than you in wrestling, do it, because it will be a lot less hard to create bad habits. Secondly, I'll say don't try and overcomplicate things. Like, we all sit down and watch Instagram reels and TikTok and watch all this like super high level wrestling and jiu-jitsu technique, when in reality, what has won matches the past decades, right, in wrestling at least, hasn't evolved that much. It's been a lot of the same stuff, right? So find some really good core setups and find 1, 2, 3 and drill those over and over and over. And then once you feel really comfortable with them, then start to expand your arsenal a little bit. But I mean, just like off the top of my head, like some very simple setups that you can do. So that comes back to that main principle. You always want to try and fight into that inside tie. You don't want to get ear to ear, because it's basically just it's a position where it's stalemate. Basically, you're not going to be able to generate much offense there. And then, level changes pop up on both of the arms. You can chop, you can hard head beat, you can fake and snap. Just like basic things like that to get your opponent moving, open up that window, and get angles on them. But like a pop, a chop, a snap, a fake shot, that's all stuff that should be, just be into. You should get 10,000 reps of that as soon as possible, and it will make you a much better hand fighter.
How much of that have you drilled just shadow wrestling as well? Is that something that you have found valuable with that?
Yeah, so shadow wrestling in terms of just kind of on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. Like we would do a lot of visualization stuff in shadow wrestling, and it's always like a good post-practice cool down to keep the sweat going too. And a lot of my shadow wrestling is just like good level change, just setting up shots. I like to get fancy sometimes and hit a little duck under, look fresh. I'll hit some low leg stuff and kind of drop to that. And then a lot of my shadow wrestling too will just be sprawl and practicing my sprawl and spinning out. And then also just adding in fake stuff there as well. So it's tougher to do some of the more advanced setups in there, but it's definitely something you can start working into your arsenal. And honestly, the more you can get used to being in your stance here, the longer you can stay there, the more you can level change. It will just make your hand fighting better overall because you don't get as tired and you won't succumb to putting yourself in bad position.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed when I was doing a lot of shadow wrestling in preparation for some comps a while ago. Man, your lower back and stuff, if you're not conditioned, your lower back and your legs take a beating just doing, like, say, 5 minutes of it compared to if you're doing 5 minutes of something else. It's another level. Yes,
100%. You'll see dudes start fading in the third period, and then they start standing up and just leaving themselves wide open to get picked apart. So that's why it's so good to shadow wrestle and train like stance motion like that, because it's such an important part of wrestling is good position. Good position will always win in wrestling.
Yeah, that's something that I know you've taught, and I know Andrew teaches as well with the wrestling side. I guess it's one of those wrestling concepts too around positioning that I'm trying to bring into my game, because as I mentioned before, just shooting from no setups and stuff like that, it doesn't ever end well. So maybe a little more on the positioning side with this. Obviously you mentioned the hand fighting, but is there anything else outside of the hand fighting that you're trying to do to set yourself up with I guess successful takedowns, successful shots, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I noticed like very quickly that there's some of my best shots in wrestling did not translate that well over to jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And I'm sure other people have had success with some of these shots, and I just haven't quite cracked the code yet. But I've found a couple positions that I'm able to bully people into that I feel much more comfortable and have a higher percentage to be able to find a submission. So obviously, like, let's start with some of the good shots that have worked well for me in the past. So just like a nice blast double where you can kind of blast them and throw their hips to the side and go right to side control. That's a classic. We've had a lot of success with doing Russians as a tie-up, working our way up, and then either snapping them down or just going straight to try and get the back and then mat return them from your feet. Some of the stuff that I haven't had as much success with would be my low leg shots. And one, I think it's because in jiu-jitsu, you are barefoot. So I start to sweat a lot. And it's kind of like the step in the bucket situation, right? Like in wrestling, you're gripped up and you can lower your level and you can hit nice low legs like that. Once you really start sweating and you're trying to plant and low leg, you end up kind of slipping sometimes and then getting stuck under that person. And whenever I'm getting stuck under people, I feel like I'm just getting opened up to guillotines and Darce chokes and like things of that nature. So I've tried to almost completely cut out scrambling and or getting under people and getting stuck in this position down here where they have a front headlock or they're on top of me, because I just don't feel great in that position. But doubles have been working great. Upper body throws, headlocks where you can go straight to side control, and then knee pulls and outside leg sweeps have been working really well too. You're on the corner and then you can sit them down and go side control from there.
Gotcha. That's funny you mentioned about the sweating, because that's something that becomes, I guess, a pain in the ass when you start to set things up and you can't even keep your footing. Do you have any other strategies then when the sweat starts rolling for setting a lot of things up? Obviously, gripping and hand fighting also becomes more difficult because things like arm drags and stuff become pretty much impossible in that situation too. So is there anything else that you like to do?
Yeah, so I think that is when your upper body, your hand fighting, your Russians, like that becomes like your really close combat stuff is when
Mm,
that becomes really important. Because whenever I'm sweating, I'm like not taking outside shots and really trying to like pop off on people and like use my speed and
yeah.
agility. I'm trying to kind of systematically work myself inside and get to stuff that I know I'm not gonna have to worry about slipping off. Um, yeah, but that's always a tough one. Like in freestyle wrestling, which is one of the two types of Olympic wrestling. So there's freestyle and
Mm.
there's Greco. Greco's upper body. So they wipe you off in between periods. So in between periods, you come off, they towel you off, and then before you're allowed back on the mat, the ref basically feels you and makes sure you're dry because they don't want slippage. So yeah,
Oh wow.
problem it's not going away.
Yeah, for sure. I I don't know if you've had much experience with it with an MMA, because are there, if you have, are there any other concepts that apply over to MMA well, or that are similar to wrestling concepts for jiu-jitsu? Because I'm assuming, except you're not really hand fighting MMA, you're obviously setting up with different strikes and things like that. So is there any concepts that you've found that may transfer over well there?
Yeah, so I am by no means the MMA expert. Love to watch it. Did do a fight whenever I lived in Chicago. It was like an amateur fight, like bar fight. Got a couple of G's to do it, but it was kind of exploring if that could be a career choice for me at the time, and realized that that just wasn't really me. Like I really enjoyed it, but like if you want to be a top tier fighter, it's a full-time job, you know. And I was having
Yeah.
success in other areas of my career, and I decided that uh, that's why I'm really happy I found jujitsu, because I feel like it's a lot lower chance that you're going to really mess yourself up and hurt yourself
Yeah.
as opposed to striking in MMA. Um, but I do have a fight on YouTube, and I think that I pretty much went in there and did like classic wrestling stuff, right? Like threw a couple
Yeah.
punches and looked for the first opportunity I could drop down, hit a double, throw the legs to a side, get side mount, and then ultimately try and go full mount and just start teeing off. That's what I see like a lot of wrestlers do, that they transition in, because that's what we know how to do really
Yeah.
well. So you think about wrestling, like you've got neutral position, you've got bottom position where you're trying to escape to score points, and then you've got top position where you can turn people over to pin them or ride them and get riding points in college. And a lot of stuff from your feet will translate over to jiu-jitsu. A lot of stuff on top, that's been awesome. Like I rode a ton of legs in college. That was definitely my best position. So riding legs and looking for rear naked choke has like translated over super well for me. But then bottom doesn't really translate over at all for
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu. And in fact, it's probably a lot of unlearning stuff from wrestling, because you do want to be on your back in jiu-jitsu, and it's a power position as opposed to trying to fight off there in wrestling.
It's funny you mentioned about the top position, the pinning. I think it's at Khabib's camp and Sambo where they talk about pinning. It must be where they talk about pinning the opponent on the ground as well. But the idea of being able to pin an opponent down so they essentially cannot escape. For example, side control. A lot of guys in jiu-jitsu are really good at escaping side control, things like that. So what is it from wrestling that you've been able to apply over that can allow you to basically pin someone down and keep them there?
So wrestling is, it's a lot of things, but body control is definitely top there, right? And so just
Mm,
all the years of wrestling and learning not to get in bad position, and not to have someone flip you over or escape or whatever, translates over really well to jujitsu. So like once
yeah.
we can get on top and we can slow things down and think a little bit more about kind of the chess match behind jujitsu, um, I mean, I feel pretty damn confident whenever I'm on top of someone. Just like years of riding legs, it translates over really well to jujitsu. But yeah.
Are there any, I guess it's a difficult one to kind of explain because it's more of a technical thing that you'd have to, there'll probably be more better to be shown, but is there, obviously being a side control, are there things that you do as a wrestler that is different than a jiu-jitsu player might do to keep someone there?
Well, it's just different, because whenever you're
Yeah.
in quote unquote side control in wrestling, you're literally on top of them trying to pin them, right? They're literally
Yeah.
fighting for their life, trying to get off their back. You're scoring points on
Yeah.
them actively. In jujitsu, it's not like that. That can be it's not a prime position for the person on bottom, but it's a position that people can systematically work through. It's like they still got a lot of match left in them. So it's two different things, really.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And I want to come back to the stand-up. So I want to try get this as practical as possible for anyone listening, and maybe just cover. I know you mentioned, you talked about the hand fighting, the sit-ups, blast doubles are kind of like your thing there as well. Are there, if you had to pick maybe a handful of takedowns for someone to drill and get good at, do you have a few that you see as the best or high percentage in that regard?
Yeah, are we talking from a jiu-jitsu perspective, like wrestling translating to jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
So let me get my pen out here and kind of think. So I think there's takedowns that you want to learn early on in your career, just because they'll be easier to learn and get good habits set up, and they can be your bread and butter. That will also be high percentage takedowns. But then there's also kind of like some new age stuff that people can hit too, that not a lot of people are doing, that can work really well in jiu-jitsu as well. So I think my number one would definitely be some type of double leg, is what we could put in there. And then maybe you could tie it in for double leg, but some type of like duck under series. I think that can work really effectively as well. Duck under being, like you can get fancy with it and you can kind of fake to this side and then throw your arm up and come around the other side, and you end up in that claw position behind someone where it's just an easy mat return right to side control, or you can claw and come over top and throw a choke in as well. But it's a really low risk move in terms of, if you don't hit it, you're just right back into your stance and you're not really missing anything. So sometimes I'll go inside tie as well, and I'll feint to the right or feint to the left, and then I'll come backside and duck straight to that double leg position. So you can catch people sleeping with that a lot when they're in bad position too. And again, it's like, it's not super high risk if you end up missing it. Where you do get at risk is if you try and hit that and you get a little sloppy and you're coming back up. What did you just do? You just open yourself up to put yourself in blast double position. So stuff to watch out for. I think after that, I'm pretty comfortable upper body. So I think like upper body takedowns, like a headlock. I mean, I'm such a sucker for a headlock. Like, I love it. It looks sweet. And a nice little fancy variation of that I've had a lot of success with in college. So whenever people come and lock up a headlock, they come this way and throw their hip into it. Well, you can do something called a crunch headlock, where you still have that headlock locked up here, and you basically reverse your hips, crunch your elbows, and then pop your hip like this, and you come backside, and it's really effective as well, and not too many people hit it. So I think upper body stuff would probably be like my number 3 takedown. I guess just to kind of close out some other upper body things that work. So my dad called this like a Polish hop. So you basically have an over-under position. That's where you see a lot of upper body happening. You see people pummeling back and forth. It's how you kind of hand fight in upper body position. And what you can do is, the side you have the overhook on, you can get an angle, come around and trap their leg and squeeze it right here, body lock, and then launch over top. And same thing, you can end up right in side control. It's a really good way to, while you're hand fighting, get position and launch. And then I think that's kind of like the top ones that I've had success with, with upper body. And then I guess lastly, to kind of like just close it out, I told you like not the biggest fan of low legs, because I don't like to get underneath people and put into that front headlock position. Like good outside leg singles, I think can work pretty well, although you have to watch out for a guillotine. Like if you're doing like an outside leg sweep and you're under people right here, I've seen people just sneak in guillotines all the time, which I don't love getting in that position either. And the last one that I really love that I hesitated bringing up first is a knee pull. It's basically like a lefty high crotch, and I lead with my left leg and bait the person into posting. You basically put your hand like this and treat it just like you're throwing a shot put. Throw that shot put, shoot in lefty, and then come backside like this. So you get that angle and you're on the outside corner. And then you can use that and basically come right up, take the back, or just run through them. But yeah, that's kind of my list.
that Polish one is actually one we learned on Saturday from Andrew. Where you replace the leg with your leg and you're basically replacing their leg and they're unbalanced, and you're just essentially falling back like that. It's actually quite handy with that over under position, because obviously you find yourself often in those positions, especially no one's going to give you double unders when you're directly in front. So it's like another option there for you.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's awesome. And kudos to the Tackett brothers, man. All of them are beasts. They're great guys. They're great ambassadors of the sport, and they certainly know their stuff. So I'm really happy to hear that he was coaching that as well.
Mm. And then just on the 50-50 positions. So you obviously talked about the air-to-air position when you're kind of both tied up together as something kind of avoid. Is there anything else that you see as a 50-50 position that if you're in that, just kind of get out of it and reset?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is going to be dealer's choice, because some people are more comfortable in certain positions than others. Like I've seen some people that I thought were in 50-50 positions, and people are just baiting into that because they can start like a go-to series or system from there. But let's see. Oh, some of the 50-50 positions that I get in that I absolutely hate, and I think a big learning curve for me has been in like the heel hook stuff with jiu-jitsu. I was a phenomenal scrambler in college, diving on legs, like rolling through, scrambling, just kind of like, it's that in-between made-up wrestling, which I really enjoy. But once we get into like a ground position where someone has like a heel on you and you have a heel on someone else, I haven't quite cracked the code on like that positioning yet. And I'm still kind of working through like the chess match of heel hooks and all of that down there. So looking to link up with the Tackets and get some crash courses on that. But I absolutely steer away from that all the time. And I think that's where a lot of wrestlers struggle coming into jiu-jitsu, and same with MMA people as well, because if someone tries to hold onto your leg like that in an MMA fight, you're just going to punch them in the face, right? So
yeah, exactly.
it seems like a technique series that is native to jiu-jitsu, and where some people that have trained exclusively jiu-jitsu definitely have a leg up, pun intended.
Yeah, definitely. You have to come to Val leg lock class on Tuesdays as well. That's where it's at too. Ryan Villalobos, he does a lot of stuff. I mean, he explained the leg game in jiu-jitsu. It's there's jiu-jitsu and there's leg locks, and leg locks is a different sport.
Yeah, and I would love to come to a practice there with you sometime, and we could switch roles and you could coach me up on some of your guys' leg lock stuff, because I definitely need some work there, and I'm all ears.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Now, this has been awesome, Joe. We cover a lot of wrestling stuff here, but if anyone wants to find you and follow you and see what you're up to, where can they do that? Yeah,
so I'm pretty active on Twitter. So at Joe Speezy, JoeSpeezy. That's my Instagram handle as well. And then LinkedIn too, Joe Spisak. Feel free to add me. I own a company called Fulfill.com. I have a couple e-commerce brands. Always looking to network with, great people in our sports genre, as well as people looking to better themselves from a career perspective too.
Awesome, perfect. Now, thanks for coming on and sharing all that wrestling knowledge, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, James. Talk soon, brother.